Okay, I'm going to go over the notes over genetics, the beginner basic notes that we started. So you should have two papers. You should have a full page that says genetics, the basics, and you should have a half page that says genotype, phenotype, practice. Okay, if you don't have one of those, I'll probably explain to you why you don't. Alright, so we're going to be going back and forth between this paper and a presentation. So obviously when we're doing the presentation, there's going to be some blanks you've got to make sure you get filled in. So you've got to be following along with this as we go through the presentation. When I want you to draw something specifically, I will switch back to this paper. Okay? Alright. So we're just going to go over just the basic genetics. Alright, first thing, make sure you're filling in your blanks as you go through this. Most organisms reproduce sexually. This means the DNA from two parents combine to form a new offspring. Now, of course, we're focusing mostly on humans, but this happens in other organisms as well. This just means that your cells that create the new offspring, you've got one part from two different parents. Okay, so two different parent cells. Alright, when you reproduce sexually, there is one set of DNA, or chromosomes, comes from each parent. Humans have a total of 46 chromosomes, or 23 pairs, in your body cells. So in most of your body cells, you're going to have 46 chromosomes total. 23 came from your father, 23 came from your mother. In sex cells, they're the only cells in your body. Now in a human, that's the egg and the sperm. In sex cells, they are the only cells that just have 23 chromosomes. So when sex cells are created by your body, it automatically only takes half of the DNA. Alright? So right over here I have like just a little quick image showing you how you have 23 pairs. So for each pair, you've got to kind of imagine, so for pair number 1, you got one of those from mom, one of those from dad. Okay? When it made the one from mom, for every little piece of that DNA that's inside that chromosome, it took one allele for every trait from her two pairs. Okay? To make one pair. So you get one from mom and one from dad for all 23. Okay? Now I'm going to switch back over to your notes page. And you should have all of these completed. If you don't, you need to probably pause the video and go back and look at the presentation again. Alright? And we're going to talk about how it happens that the sex cells only have 23 and why. Alright, so we're going to kind of draw in this little section. We're going to draw a sperm, and inside I want you to write 23. I know it's kind of hard to see, but that's a 23. Alright, so this is going to be a sperm. Now this is how it works in humans, obviously. And then I want you to draw an egg, which would come from your mother, and inside it you also have 23. 23 chromosomes get made, because when they come together in what is called fertilization, make sure you're writing this on your notes page, they create what is called a zygote, which has a total of 46. Each species of animal has a certain number of chromosomes. They're not all the same. Not all things have 46. So if both of these had their full 46 and they joined together, it would make 92, and that's not the number that a human has. So when every sperm your dad creates, every egg your mom creates has only 23 of the chromosomes. Okay? On those chromosomes, it's going to have one piece for each trait. Alright, now I'm going to go back to the presentation. Lots of clicking back and forth. And now you'll have some more blanks to fill in on your notes page. Oh, hold on, I'm going to have to spread out the screen. Or move it over just a little bit at least. Alright, so within the chromosomes that you get, you have what are called genes, and that's just sections of DNA that code for a trait. Every gene has different forms. Those are called alleles. Okay? You can either get a dominant allele, which is always going to show up in the offspring if it's there, and we represent these with a capital letter, or you're going to get a recessive allele, which show up only if the dominant allele is absent. Okay, so we represent those with a lowercase letter. So sometimes it helps people to think dominant is strong, so big, so capital letter. Recessive is the weaker one, so it's the lowercase letter. You have 2 alleles for every trait. So for example, one trait that we could talk about for a human would be hair color. Now, obviously, hair color, I told you already, has more than just one little thing that controls it. It has several different genes that control it. But you could kind of say for hair color, brown is a dominant allele, okay? And red would be a recessive allele. So you're going to get 2 of those, one from each parent, for the color of your hair. If brown is dominant, we're going to represent it with a capital B. If red is recessive, we're going to do it with a lowercase b. You pick the letter from the dominant trait. And you're going to get 2 of those, one from each parent. Okay? So you have 2 alleles for each trait. You could get both dominants from your parents. You could get both recessives from your parents. It just depends. Alright? Now, I wanted to show you this so that you could kind of get an idea. A minute ago I showed you this picture that's on the left with the pairs of chromosomes. This is showing one of chromosome 15. So one of these right here. This just shows, now obviously they're not really color-coded, but they have all these different sections on these chromosomes. Just chromosome 15 contains 100 million base pairs. Okay? So, let me go back. 100 million base pairs that control different things about you. Okay? So just on this one set of chromosomes, there's things on here like limb deformity, hair color, diabetes, epilepsy. There's a couple different cancer ones on there. I know lymphoma's on there. Muscular dystrophy, dyslexia. All of those, all in this one thing, there's all these different things plus more that you could have a gene, that you're going to have a gene or for, and you're going to have a different allele. That doesn't mean you're going to have it, because that's what dominant recessive means. But all that's controlled just on one of these number 15s. So you could have many different genes and traits on each set of chromosomes. So that's why when I told you when we first started all this that it's pretty complicated. Okay? Alright. You need to know the difference in genotype and phenotype. Make sure you're filling these in on your notes. If you get behind, you need to pause the video and go back. Genotype is the type of genes that are present. So what the letters are is how we represent them. So an example would be like big B, little b. So genotype is what genes you got. Did you get dominants? Did you get recessives? Okay? Phenotype is the actual physical characteristics that are present because of the genes that you got, because of the genotype. So that would be like brown eyes. Okay? Okay, so just remember that the genotype is letters, the phenotype is actually what you see. Okay? Now, you can predict outcomes of genetic crosses by using a Punnett square. I'm just going to show you a basic one today, but we'll practice this more later. So don't be really worried if you don't completely get it. But what you do with the Punnett square is when you started off, this middle would be blank. Okay? And then you would put one parent across the top, one parent across the bottom. Now, there's normally not pictures on there too. This is just one I found that I thought showed you pretty well. So like if this was the dad has brown eyes, and his genotype for those brown eyes is a capital B, so a dominant for brown, and then he has a recessive for blue. Okay, dominant is always stronger. So if you have one of each, that dominant is going to cover up that blue. So he has brown eyes. Well, the mom has brown eyes. And we know that she has dominant homozygous, so that means she has both capital B's, okay? And then what you do is you cross them. So for this box, this represents an offspring, it would get the capital B from dad and a capital B from mom, so it would have brown eyes, okay? In this box, it would get the recessive B for blue from dad and the capital B for mom. You always put the capital first, but they would still have brown eyes. The genotype would be capital B, little b, heterozygous, but the phenotype would still be brown eyes. So same thing on these two. Alright, so with these two parents, there's really no genetic way that they should have any kids other that get blue eyes, okay? Now, remember, I told you already that your eyes are controlled by more than just one set, so we have lots. All right, but this is just for an example. Now here, if we had a blue-eyed dad, which in order to have blue eyes, they'd have to have 2 recessives. Okay, that's the only way it shows up, because if there's one dominant, it covers it up. So, and this mom had both dominant for brown eyes. The mom can only give the capital B. The dad can only give the little b, but they still have all brown-eyed kids. Now again, remember, genetics has to do with chance, and there's more than that. But only this combination, it's all brown, because there's no way for the kid to get 2 blues because the mom doesn't have a blue to share. Okay? Alright, now we're going to go back and do this later. Well, we can go ahead and do it now. Alright, so this says you own a rose farm, and we're trying to decide what type of roses will be available to sell. I know it's kind of cutting off the problem. Let me fix it. Okay. You know some facts about your roses, and you know some basic genetics thanks to your awesome 7th grade science teacher who is now retired and traveling the world. Okay? Alright, so we're going to take it off this. I'm just going to put it on my paper so that we don't have to switch back and forth. Alright, so I'm now saving drafts, and hold on.
Pardon this interruption, but this time...
Alright, that was an announcement. Okay, so what we're going to just go through this. You're going to decide what kind of roses you're going to have. So here are the facts that you know. Okay? You know that red roses are dominant to white roses. So you know that we're going to use a capital R for red, and you're going to use a lowercase r for white, because you always keep the letter of the dominant. Okay? And we also know that all of our roses are red. Okay? So first thing, the possible genotypes, so the letters, for your roses. If they're red, we could either have roses that have both dominant R's for red, because that would give us a red rose, or we could have heterozygous roses, which just means one dominant, one recessive, but that red would still cover up that white. So those are the possible genotypes that our roses could have. For white roses, the only way to get a recessive trait is to have both recessive traits. So you'd have to have 2 lowercase r's. Okay? Now, we got a scientist, and they told us that ours are all heterozygous. They all have big R, little r. And we're going to cross them with each other to see what possible genotypes and phenotypes we would have. So I want you to write here, draw you a box. Don't take up too much room because we've got stuff to write on the right side. And we're going to put a parent rose bush on the top and a parent rose bush on the side. And we just said, the scientist told us all of ours have one big R, one little r. Okay? Alright, so in this possible offspring, they would get a capital R from the top and a capital R from the side, just like a little grid. Okay, so they get 2 big R's. So what color are those roses going to be? Okay, they're going to be red. In this box, they get a little r from here. I'm going to write it second because you have to always put the capital first. And they got a capital R from this rose. Okay, so what color are these roses going to be? Okay, they're going to be red again because remember the dominant, if there's one dominant, one recessive, this dominant overtakes that recessive. So we still have red. Okay, in this box, they get the capital R from the top, lowercase r from here. Okay, again, red roses. Alright, in this box they get see, you got to line them up. They get a little r from the top, a little r from the side. So these roses would be white. The only way to get white is both recessives. So we're going to have to count 2 things. There's going to be a little bit of math in this, but it's not bad. So the first thing we're going to look at are our genotypes. Okay, remember genotypes are the actual genes you have. So if we look at our 4 offspring possibilities, now remember this is all possibility, it's not definite, okay? We've got a big R, so that's homozygous dominant. We've got big R, that's heterozygous. And we've got little r. And then we're going to do a percentage. So for big R, only 1 out of our 4 boxes, so that's 1 out of 4, which you should know is 25%. Big R, little r, heterozygous. So we've got one there and one there. So that's 2 out of 4, which is a half, which is 50%. And then we have homozygous recessive. We only have 1 out of 4, so 25%. So there's a 25% chance of getting homozygous dominant, a 50% chance of getting heterozygous, and a 25% chance of getting homozygous recessive. Now again, remember, this is all probability. We could make crosses of these roses all day long and still only get all these. We never know. So now let's do phenotypes. So phenotypes are what you actually see because of the genes. So we've got either red or we've got white. You don't have to list them more than once because we're going to be doing the percentage. So for red, 3 out of our 4 boxes say we're going to get red roses. So that's 75% chance. 1 out of 4 of our boxes have white. So that's a 25% chance. So there's a 75% chance that we're going to only have red roses next year. Okay? So if you were going to advertise for your roses, you would probably say, at our rose farm, we're going to have plenty of red roses and a small amount of white roses or something like that. You wouldn't want to advertise you're going to have all white roses because that's not going to happen, most likely. Okay? There's a chance, but most likely it's not going to happen. Alright, so now get the little page, okay, this one, and we're just going to go through and review a few things. Okay, first thing I want you to do is write at the top genotype and phenotype. Remember, you can pause the video if you need to. And remember that genotype are the actual genes, so you can remember that because it's kind of what it starts with. And phenotype is the physical thing that comes from it, so pH there. Okay, I want you to remember that dominant is stronger, so we show it with a capital letter. And recessive is weaker, so we show it with a lowercase. Okay, pause if you need to. And the other thing we need to talk about is heterozygous and homozygous. These are both vocabulary words. Heterozygous, I'm just going to write it right beside it, means you're going to have different genes. Homozygous means you're going to have the same. So we're going to go through and practice this real quick together just on genotype and phenotype. Okay? So, if this was our genotype, capital A, little a, that means we have one dominant, one recessive. Okay? And it tells you here, for heterozygous, you're going to put HE. For homozygous, you're going to put HO. They are different. We have a dominant and a recessive. So that is heterozygous. This one we have 2 capital B, so they're the same. That's homozygous, so HO, and that would be called homozygous dominant because they're both dominant. Okay? This one is capital J, little j, so that's heterozygous because they're different. Okay, same thing there. So heterozygous. Okay, capital R, they're the same. So that's homozygous, and this would be called homozygous dominant because they're both dominant. Little g, they're the same, so homozygous, but that's homozygous recessive. Okay? Alright, so now let's do a few examples of looking for the phenotype. So I'm going to give you kind of a situation, and we're going to have to pick for these genotypes what the phenotype would be. So this tells us rolling your tongue is dominant to not rolling your tongue. So rolling your tongue is dominant, not rolling your tongue is recessive. So since it's rolling your tongue, we're using R's. Okay, so a capital R would mean roll. A lowercase r would mean you can't roll. So on this one, if we got a dominant for rolling your tongue from one parent and a dominant for rolling your tongue from another parent, okay, are you going to be able to roll your tongue or not? Okay, you're going to be able to roll it. Okay, this one, if we got heterozygous, if we got a dominant from one parent and a recessive from the other parent, that doesn't mean you're going to get to do it sometimes and not other times. That dominant will always overtake that recessive. Okay, always. So you're going to be able to roll your tongue. That recessive gets beaten up kind of by that dominant, if that helps. Okay, here, if you got both recessives, both little r's, then you can't roll your tongue. That's the only way to get a recessive trait is to get both recessive genes. Okay? The next one is striped leaves to solid leaves. If you want to pause and try this one on your own and then go back and check. Okay, a capital S is going to stand for striped because it's dominant. A lowercase s is going to represent solid because it's the recessive. Okay, so if you want to pause, you can. I'm about to go through these. Okay, this one, there's both dominant, so that means it's going to be striped. This one has one of each. That doesn't mean you're going to have both on the plant. The striped is the dominant, so it will cover up the recessive, so you're still going to have striped. And then if they were both little, both recessive, that's when you would get your solid. Okay, so now let's go the other direction. If I give you a phenotype, we want you to list the genotypes. Remember, right here, the letter comes from the dominant trait. Alright, so we're talking about tall plants being dominant. Okay, we're going to be using T's. So tall plants would be a capital T. Short plants recessive, so it'll be a lowercase t. Okay, so we have two different genotypes that could give us a tall plant. You could have both capitals, so homozygous dominant, that would give you a tall plant. Or you could have heterozygous, because that dominant is going to cover up that recessive. So both of those would give you a dominant. Short, the only way to get a recessive trait is to have both, so you would have to get both lowercase. Okay, pause the video and try the next one on your own, and then play it again and get the answers. Alright, this one told you that green seeds are dominant to yellow. We're going to be using G's because you take it from the dominant. So green will be a big G, yellow will be a little g. That's probably one of the hardest things for y'all to remember. Okay, so in order to get a green, you could have both capitals, so homozygous dominant, or you could have heterozygous, one of each. The only way to get yellow would be two littles. Okay, now you are going to put these in your journal. Okay, this page with phenotype and genotype, make sure so I don't tell you wrong, is going on page 77. Alright, and then the basic genetic notes, you're going to need to cut in half, and you're going to layer this one on 76. So, genetic basics 76, the phenotype genotype paper 77.